All right, welcome back to Prayer of the Barren Womb. We are in part 24 of the Four Rivers of Eden. Now, I usually have a little bit better prepared plan when I make these videos, but I just have something hot off the press that I'm excited to share. I call these Mandelbrot moments. And I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, but if you go online and use any search engine and type in Mandelbrot, Mandelbrot equation, Mandelbrot set, you'll come up with these things that are called fractals, and they're very beautiful. What they are is visual representations, artistic renderings, if you will, of a mathematical equation that this guy Mandelbrot developed. And what they are is they're infinite. They're infinite loops, and you see this primary shape at the beginning of the set show up again and again and again. The more times you loop these numbers through this equation, you'll see this primary shape show up and surface. It's as if you're going deep and deep and deep into this mathematical equation, and if you keep going, you'll find it again. This primary shape will be a little bit altered. It'll be a little bit shifted, but you'll be able to clearly identify it as the primary shape with subtle features of differences about it. And it's really fascinating when you start getting into it. So the reason why I call what I'm about to share you a Mandelbrot moment is because when I first began my first post-Hebrew Roots Awakening Bible study, which began about 5 years ago, after about 7 years of getting grounded in what exactly this Hebrew Roots movement was. We had a celebration for Hanukkah. We had some friends up, and we had a young man accept faith in God around our dinner table. And I felt very strongly the need to begin a Bible study and to get this young man grounded at the beginning of the book, which typically doesn't happen for Christians. We typically say a prayer of faith, and we're given a tract, or we're given the Gospel of John, which, by the way, is the most mystical of all the Gospels. And, it's like, here you go, read this Gospel of John and, start your journey. But it's like reading the Lord of the Rings trilogy, beginning with the Return of the King. You don't know plot. You don't know where this has come from and where it's going. We're beginning believers at, the New Testament. Like the Old Testament, it's not that important. Yeah, there's a story of David and the Goliath in there, but, it's cool, I suppose. But we're not really told, we're not given an understanding of the beginning of the book, so that we're just showing up and 2/3 of the way through the storyline and expecting people to understand what the journey's about. And that's part of the Hebrew Roots Awakening, is recovering the themes at the beginning of the book. So anyhow, long and the short of it is I felt very strongly this desire to begin a Bible study for Nick at the beginning of the book. What a radical concept, right? Yeah, that's all done away with. We don't need to know that stuff. So as we were progressing through the study, and I began in the book of Genesis, we're 5 years into it, and we've taken some detours and launched in some different directions and covered a lot of territory. But in my opinion, we're still 5 years into the study. We still haven't gone through the 3rd chapter of Genesis yet. We're still progressing through, and what's happening are these Mandelbrot moments. The themes and the patterns of Scripture are showing up again and again downstream of the garden story. And it's showing up again, these Mandelbrot equations, these patterns. And I actually suggested that in the study. I think we were probably about 2 years into the study, and I suggested that the Torah is kind of like a Mandelbrot. It's kind of like a fractal. We'll see these shapes showing up again and again. And I was kind of crossing my fingers, throwing a Hail Mary, if you'll pardon the how completely, wrong that is. But I was kind of throwing a Hail Mary um, when I suggested that the Torah was like a Mandelbrot equation. Well, I'm 5 years into this study now, and I have a much greater degree of confidence that we will never exhaust Torah. We will never get to the edge of it. We will never be able to have a full understanding. It will keep revealing itself to us in patterns and in principles that will surface again and again. We'll never get to the end of this book. We will spend eternity in the delights and in the beauties and the wonders of Torah. And so I had one as I was, my first, this has happened twice so far in the 2 months that I've been covering the four rivers of Eden. I've had this Mandelbrot moment twice. This is the second time it's happened, that just recently. The first one was when I was starting to put together the idea that maybe there's a deep prophetic understanding to the four rivers of Eden, because they had always eluded me. And I had said this many times in my study. I got nothing here. And I prayed about it. And as I started the study of Genesis 5 years ago, it became a concern that I had nothing to offer on the four rivers of Eden. So it became a matter of not intense prayer, but it was there. It's like, there's got to be more to these four rivers. And so that story is in the beginning of this series. But my first Mandelbrot moment was in seeing these four atoms. This is the first time I'd ever seen four atoms in the first two chapters of Genesis. And I don't know if this insight is available elsewhere. I mean, I'm sure it is. God is opening the books. I'm sure there are people all over the place having deeper understanding of the second chapter of Genesis. But anyhow, for me, it was seeing these four atoms and seeing a name for each one of them. Now, the name, it was my Mandelbrot moment. I actually saw there will be four historical figures in human history that will equate to each one of these four rivers. My Mandelbrot moment was when I realized that each one of these atoms had a name. And so I named them Doing Adam, Barren Adam, Lonely Adam, and Bridegroom Adam. And then I realized that these four historical figures corresponded to the names. And that was a downstream aha. The beginning of this study was the four rivers actually equate to four humans in human history. The Mandelbrot moment was seeing the names and how these four human figures in our history related to each one of them. Now, that was one of my Mandelbrot moments in this study. I recently had another one, and I want to share it with you. And hopefully I'll be able to express this without too much confusion. I noticed that one of the things I do without a lot of preparation on these studies is I end up explaining to myself as I'm talking to the camera. And that might not be the best for you guys, but I want to birth this. I want to get this. I want to put definition to the shape, to this shadow thing that like a shadow outline that I see. So I'm verbalizing this, and bear with me. Okay, so the second Mandelbrot moment happened in the last couple of days as I was reviewing part 23. I go back and see what I actually posted to the internet and kind of, debrief. So as I was debriefing, I was realizing that in part 23, I talked to you about these expulsion events that seem to happen to each one of these guys. In the pristine, in the right side up world, where we have birth order in its correct placement of, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In Genesis 2, verse 4, we have what I believe to be the first reversal of birth order. And we have, this is the history of the heavens and the earth. Okay, birth order is correct. And then Genesis 2 verse 4 goes on to say, when they were created in the day that Yahovah Elohim created the earth and the heavens. A reversal of birth order, which this has always stood out to me as, when I first noticed it, I was curious about it, and then it became kind of a wink and a grin. God's just kind of smiling at us and being playful. Now what I believe this reversal of birth order to be is to be a profound prophecy of what is going to take place downstream. We have from Genesis 2:4 through the end of the book, we have the reversal of birth order. So Genesis 2 verse 4 became very mysterious to me. And so when we see, okay, let me get back on track here. Shoot, I lost my thread. Okay, stay with it, Jim. Right. In part 23, I was talking about what we have as a reversal of order. Genesis 2 verse 4 prophesies to us that we're going to see reversals in the downstream world of the pristine Garden of Eden. We're going to see, for example, reversal, I think, can be a summary word to define the plan of redemption. In the original creation, man was given the keys to the kingdom and lost the keys of the kingdom through deception, through disobedience. The reversal of that is the restoration, the redemption of the keys of the kingdom will have to be won back by a man, not through deception and rebellion, but the reverse of deception and rebellion, walking in truth and walking in obedience. We're going to look for the redemptive, the redeemer of mankind, to be walking in the reverse of what Adam walked out. Adam lost the keys through deception and disobedience. The Redeemer is going to have to recover the keys to the kingdom through obedience and truth. Okay, that's an example of reversal. The original man was created in a pristine environment of the garden, failed in the garden, and then was expelled from the garden. The reverse of that would be Noah being expelled from the first order of creation. He's expelled, and then he has his garden test and failures. Okay, so there's a reversal between the garden, the testing in the garden, and expulsion. Here we have garden, expulsion. Here we have expulsion, garden. Seems to me that this pattern is repeated in Abram's life, where in part 23, the part that I just posted, we see Abram being brought to the land and then expelled from the land. Then we see the beginnings of the same themes that we see in the original garden being repeated in the life of Abram, with deception. And then we talked about how there's a stranger in the house now. As a result of this deception, he descends down into Egypt, brings deception with him into Egypt, is expelled from Egypt, and now there's a stranger in the house. Is there a serpent in the garden? Okay, we're going to hold on to that, because what I continued to see as I meditated upon part 23 was, it seems like there's an additional feature of patterning that I had never seen before. A Mandelbrot moment where we see not only was Abram expelled from the land, he's actually formed outside of the land, in the same way that Adam was formed outside of the land. If we look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, we find that the Lord God, Yahovah Elohim, formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Then Yahovah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. So in Genesis 2, verse 7 and 8, Adam is formed outside of the garden of material that is different than the garden. Adam is actually formed of the material realm building blocks, and then he is brought into a very special place, the garden. And so I see that same thing happening outside in Ur of Chaldees. God shatters and scatters the third judgment, the third worldwide judgment of humanity. God shatters and scatters. Terah, or Abram, I should say, Abram is formed, his character is being formed outside of the land of promise in the same way that Adam was formed outside of the Garden of Eden. Abram is being formed outside in the land of shattering and scattering, and he is being brought to the land of promise. So I see this additional I would say this would be an additional argument, additional layer of understanding to support the idea that Abram is in fact another iteration of Adam. So he's formed outside, brought to the land, and then the land expels him. He's expelled from the land of promise. Deception descends upon Egypt through the conjuring of Abram and Sarai. And we can't have deception. Deception is a problem. Deception needs to be rooted out. God desires truth in the inmost parts. So deception is brought with Abram and Sarai to Egypt. God brings curses and plagues upon Egypt. The Egyptians kick him out, and then Abram is brought back to the land of promise. And what I see is another parallel here, because it's very interesting in Genesis chapter 2 that for the second time, Adam is brought and placed in the garden. So we have Adam being built outside, being built of different material than the garden, brought from that realm and placed in the garden. Then we have the four rivers of Genesis 2, verse 10 through 15, and then we get to Genesis 15. And then for a second time, Yahovah Elohim took the man and put him in the garden. So Yahovah Elohim takes the man, places him in the garden in Genesis 2, verse 8. And then for a second time, Yahovah Elohim takes the man and puts him in the garden to tend and to keep. So I see Abram patterning both of these guys. And this is my Mandelbrot moment. Maybe it's not as much of an aha for you guys as it is for me, but I've been steeping in this. And so for me, this is like remarkable that, okay, here's an additional argument for me to add weight to the idea that Abram is our third river of life. He's not only iterating lonely Adam, and we'll get to that when we get to, I haven't even touched on lonely Adam yet. Lonely Adam has to do with Tardema. But Abram is walking out the pattern of Genesis 2, verse 8 Adam, and he's walking out the pattern of Genesis 2, verse 15 Adam. This Adam over here is barren. And it's interesting that what we find in Genesis chapter 11, which is the beginning of our Abram story, Genesis chapter 11, we find in verse 30 that Abram takes for himself a wife, Sarai, and we find out in verse 30 that she is barren. This is where the name of my channel, Prayer of the Barren Womb, begins with Sarah in Genesis 11, verse 30. She's a beautiful but barren woman. So we that Adam, formed outside, is taken to the garden. Abram is being formed outside of the land of promise, but he's barren. He can have no children through his beautiful wife. And so to me, this is like, okay, Abram is not only on the heels of a third judgment. The first judgment, being Adam and Eve, collectively represented the entirety of humanity. They were expelled. The judgment, the bolt of God, fell upon the Lamb that actually clothed them and covered them. Their efforts were futile. Then we find collective Adam being judged at the flood. We're preserved through Noah. Noah has his own individual test. And then collective judgment happens at the Tower of Babel. Noah's world is destroyed. And now we need a third river of life, who is Abram, who is now walking in the pattern of both barren Adam and lonely Adam, indicating to me very strongly that Abram is in fact a type of both of these Adams. I suspect he's going to be a type of our third Adam, the third Adam of Genesis chapter 2, if we kind of just put a line right here. All right, I'm starting to babble. Hopefully this will make some sense. And I'm gonna leave this off right now. I'm gonna cut this off, and I'm gonna come back and try and digest this and try to format this so that I'm not so confusing and rattled. Anyhow, I'm gonna put this up. You guys tell me what you think. Thanks for your time.